Vera Cutshaw is 68 years old now, still cures somewhere around 350 hams a year in the same smokehouse barn her father built in 1958, and keeps a banker's box of receipts going back to that same year sitting on a shelf in her kitchen where she can reach it without having to think twice about where it is. She has needed to reach for it exactly once in her life, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday in February when Hart County, Kentucky, decided her father's barn had been sitting abandoned for years, despite a state inspection sticker dated that same fall hanging on the smokehouse door the whole time. Harold Skaggs had farmed the section next to the Cutshaws for going on 50 years, and he was up early that morning anyway, same as most mornings, when he saw 2 county trucks and a padlock crew pull down the long gravel drive toward Vera's barn. He said later he figured somebody had finally come to fix the culvert that had been washing out at the end of her lane for a year. He did not figure the county had come to seize the building entirely. Somebody had to write this one down, or it would have been forgotten. If you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, take a second to subscribe before we go any further. The rest of it matters. Hart County's Abandoned Property Ordinance lets the county take possession of structures it determines have sat unused and unmaintained for an extended period, following a formal notice sent to the address on file. A reasonable enough rule on paper for catching genuinely derelict barns and falling down sheds nobody wants anymore. Vera's barn sat back nearly a quarter mile from the county road, mostly screened by a stand of cedars. The front side facing the road weathered gray and unremarkable, while the working side, the side nobody driving past ever saw, had a smokehouse running steady 12 months a year. A county inspector drove past it twice in 2024, doing routine blight surveys, noted the structure's worn exterior both times, and flagged it for the abandonment process without ever once walking the quarter mile back to look at the side that mattered. Vera's only vehicle, a Chevy half-ton with close to 200,000 miles on it, sat parked at the working end of the barn nearly every day of the week, visible to anybody who actually drove the lane instead of just glancing from the road. Royce Bewley, who ran a small country store at the crossroads 2 miles up and had carried Cutshaw Country ham on his shelf for as long as he could remember, used to tell customers that Vera's hams sold themselves faster than anything else in the case. The kind of product a man didn't need to advertise so much as just keep in stock. The notice the county mailed that fall went to an address that hadn't existed in any practical sense since Kentucky converted rural mail routes to standard street addressing back in the 1990s. The Cutshaw property's tax record had never been updated past RR2 Box 145, a designation the post office stopped delivering to sometime around 1998, the same year as it happened that Dewey Cutshaw died, and Vera inherited a filing system nobody at the county had bothered to revisit since. The notice came back undeliverable, without anybody at the county following up to find Vera's actual address, which any one of her neighbors, the county extension office, or the state inspector who certified her smokehouse every single year could have provided in under 5 minutes. The ordinance's notice requirement, as written, only obligated the county to mail something to whatever address sat on file. It did not obligate anybody to confirm the mail had actually gone anywhere useful. Dewey Cutshaw built that barn the summer Vera was born, framed it himself with help from 2 brothers-in-law, and started curing hams in it within the year, a craft he'd learned from his own father and refined over 4 decades into something people drove from 3 counties over to buy. He kept every receipt that ever passed through the operation: salt and saltpeter purchases, hog deliveries, the state inspection certificates renewed every single year without exception, a habit he passed down to Vera, the same patient way he'd passed down the curing itself. Receipt's the only thing that remembers when everybody else forgets, he used to tell her, dropping the article the way he did most evenings when his hands were busy salting a fresh ham, and his patience for full sentences was thin. He taught her to weigh the salt to the pound, He taught her to read the color of a properly cured ham at a glance. He taught her, above everything else, to keep the paper, because meat could be argued about, but a dated receipt mostly couldn't. He died in 1998, and Vera kept every box exactly where he'd left them, adding her own to the stack without ever once needing to start a new system. The padlock crew that pulled into Vera's drive that February morning worked for a county contractor under instructions to secure the structure and post notice of the pending county auction. Standard procedure for a property the file said had gone unclaimed through the full notice period. Inside that barn, hanging in the curing room at exactly the stage of the process that mattered most, were 211 hams roughly 4 months into a curing cycle that ran close to a year start to finish. The kind of batch that doesn't tolerate an unscheduled week of locked doors and disrupted airflow without real risk of spoiling. Harold called Vera the moment he understood what he was actually watching, and she was in her truck inside 3 minutes. The banker's box already on the passenger seat, because some instinct, the same instinct her father had drilled into her without either of them ever calling it that, told her exactly what she needed to bring. No time to dress properly. No time to think twice. Just boots, a coat over her nightgown, and the box. She found the crew foreman standing at the barn door with a fresh padlock in one hand and a county notice in the other. 211 hams at roughly $160 apiece, once finished and sold, came to just under $34,000. Money that depended entirely on the curing room keeping its temperature and airflow steady through a process that didn't forgive interruption. This barn's been cured out of every single year since 1958, she told him, setting the box on the tailgate of her truck. Receipts are right here if anybody cares to look. The foreman, a younger man working off a county work order and nothing more, looked at the stack the way a man looks at a problem nobody briefed him on. He wasn't unreasonable about it, not exactly. He just didn't have the authority to call off a county seizure on the word of a woman with a cardboard box, not without somebody above him signing off first. He made that call. The county's code enforcement director, a man named Russ Tabor, drove out himself within the hour and stood in the cold reading through receipts that ran in unbroken order from 1958 straight through to a state inspection certificate dated 4 months earlier, the ink barely dry. Not annoyed exactly, standing there in the cold, or maybe he was, a little, the particular annoyance of a man whose morning had just gotten considerably more complicated than the work order had promised. He read the inspection date twice, the way a man reads a number that's directly contradicting a file he trusted an hour earlier. He admitted, plain, that he honestly didn't know how a property actively inspected by the state that same season had ended up flagged abandoned by his own department, without anybody catching the contradiction sooner. What the county's blight survey had missed, and what its own mail system had compounded, without anybody noticing, was the simple fact that a barn could look exactly like nothing was happening on the side a truck driving past could see, while the side that mattered ran on a schedule older than most of the county employees handling the file. A curing barn doesn't advertise itself the way a working machine shop does. No diesel smell carrying out to the road, no equipment noise, nothing but a closed door and a smell that only reaches a person standing a good deal closer than a passing car ever gets. Not malice, exactly, just a process built around a drive by glance and an address nobody had bothered confirming in over 25 years. The kind of quiet, bureaucratic drift that costs nothing right up until the morning it costs somebody almost everything. The county rescinded the seizure on the spot, the padlock crew gone within the half hour, and Russ Tabor's office issued a formal written apology within the week, along with an immediate correction to the property's mailing address. He drove back out himself to deliver it in person rather than trust the mail a second time. A detail he mentioned to Vera without making much of it. though she noticed. The county also adopted a new internal policy that spring requiring an in-person contact attempt, not just a mailed notice, before any structure could be flagged for abandonment seizure going forward. A change the county commission minutes credited, without using her name directly, to a property owner whose receipts had proven the system wrong in under 15 minutes. Flat. Vera Cutshaw is 68 this year. She still cures her hams in the same barn, still keeps Dewey's original receipts in the same banker's box, and has added a folder of her own from that February morning, the county's apology letter filed right behind the inspection certificate that saved her batch. She lost not a single ham from that year's run, the curing room undisturbed long enough that the only lasting damage was to the county's own filing system. Royce Bewley sold every one of those 211 hams that fall same as he always did, and made a point of telling the story to anybody who bought one, whether they asked or not. Asked once whether she'd ever doubted, standing at that tailgate, whether the paperwork would actually hold up. She said she honestly hadn't thought about it that way at the time. She'd been thinking about the hams. The county's paperwork, she figured, was the county's problem to sort out, and it generally did, once somebody finally looked at it properly. Harold Skaggs still tells the story leaning on his own fence some mornings, looking across the road at a barn that still looks, from the front anyway, like nothing much is happening inside it. He says the county wasn't wicked about it, just lazy in a particular way that almost cost a woman a year's work over an address that had been wrong for a quarter century. He says a man ought to walk the whole way around a thing before he decides what it is, and that Dewey Cutshaw knew that long before any county inspector ever needed to learn it the hard way. The culvert at the end of Vera's Lane, the one Harold figured the county trucks had come out for in the first place, finally got fixed that same spring, almost as an afterthought. The one piece of county business that morning that had actually gone the way everybody originally expected it to.